This is At Ease, the military podcast of Thomas Nelson Community College. I'm Gary Pounder, part of the military team here at TNCC. And on today's edition of the pod, we're going to have an Air Force Recruiters Roundtable. Representatives, recruiters from both the active duty side and the Virginia Air National Guard, talking about all the education, training, and career opportunities available both through active duty service in the Air Force and in the Air National Guard. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first of all, don't forget, if you're a military-affiliated student looking to maybe start, continue, or finish your education or training, learn more about how Thomas Nelson Community College can help you achieve your goals. We've got more than 80 degree and certificate programs, many completely online. Our classes are flexible and affordable. We have in-person, hybrid, and online delivery formats, and tuition that's well below the tuition assistance cap, no matter where you're stationed. If you'd like more information, if you're active duty, a member of the National Guard, Air Guard, or Reserve personnel, or a military spouse, call this number, 757-825-2938. If you're a veteran or a dependent who has inherited VA benefits, call this number, 757-825-3442. Or you can visit our military website, that's tncc.edu/military. Success is closer than you think at Thomas Nelson, the Peninsula's community college. And as I mentioned, we are hosting an Air Force Recruiter Roundtable on the podcast here today. We have two representatives who do recruiting on the active duty side. First up is Tactical Sergeant David Herr. David, welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And
along with him, we have Staff Sergeant Benjamin Rhodes.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Great to have you here as well. And representing the Virginia Air National Guard, we have Tech Sergeant Franklin Love.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And we also have Tech Sergeant Alexandria Zavala.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great to have all of you here today. Well, again, all of us here at the table today have taken, that Air Force journey. Mine was many, many years ago, back before you guys were even born, but we won't get any further into exactly how old I am. But I'm curious. Obviously, you're now in the business of bringing new recruits into the Air Force Air National Guard. Let's start with Tech Sergeant David Herr. David, what got you in the Air Force in the first place?
I wanted opportunities for myself. I spoke to a lot of my family members who did serve in the Army as well as the Navy, and they both told me that the Air Force would be the best option for me and for the career opportunities that I wanted to pursue.
And why do you think they recommended the Air Force over the services they were in, the Army or the Navy? And by the way, I heard the same thing from my father, my uncle. They were the World War II generation. They said, you want to go in the Air Force because they always have a warm place to sleep, and they get 3 hot meals a day. So,
yeah, I totally agree with you. I believe that the Air Force definitely takes care of the active duty members, Guard members, Reserve members, and family. So the Air Force always does the best that they can to make sure that, whether we're abroad or here in the States, that they take care of us because, we do put our lives on the line.
And Sergeant Rhodes, same question for you. What brought you into the Air Force? Tell us about your Air Force journey up to the present time.
Well, originally I came in because I wanted a career in law enforcement. And looking at the other branches, I was most attracted to the security forces, which is the cops in the Air Force. Now, I ended up not getting a security forces contract, and I was okay with that because in the civilian world, military experience will still help you achieve, get your foot in the door to become law enforcement.
Now, instead of becoming a security forces specialist, you wound up in what AFSC?
I'm a 2T1, which is ground transportation. So, to put it into a nutshell, I move people and cargo. Mm-hmm. I handle all the different aspects of logistics transportation on the ground. We have the same sort of jobs in the Air Force that fly, but obviously I'm going to be using vehicles for what I do.
Sure, and I think we've gotten, with what's been going on in Afghanistan over the past couple of months, withdrawal there, people have begun to appreciate the complexity and the difficulty involved in trying to move people, especially a large number of people out of a certain location, in a certain length of time, and certainly what you do in vehicle ops, what other people do in terms of aerial port, air cargo, things like that, a very important part of the equation. Now, on the guard side, again, we have Tech Sergeant Love and Tech Sergeant Zavala. Obviously, with a guard, you don't technically move around as much. Now, did both of you begin active duty, or did you begin your Air Force or Guard careers with the Air National Guard?
So I've always been in the Air National Guard. I've been in for 8 years now. So this is pretty much all I know.
Now, what led you to join the National Guard versus going active duty in the Air Force or joining the Air Force Reserve?
Oh, sorry.
I would say, what was it that prompted you to join the Air National Guard versus going active duty in the Air Force, or say joining the Air Force Reserve?
So I wanted to stay in the local area at first, and I knew I wanted to serve, especially Air Force side. My stepdad was Air Force, so it was just kind of what I was used to. And I didn't really know that there was an Air National Guard. I just heard of the Air Force and then the reserves. But I was at a job fair and I saw the Air National Guard there. So that's kind of how I got into the Guard. And then, I really did like the benefits of, being able to serve your state and your country. So, and also having the benefits of college, because that was my main reason for joining.
Sure. Now, we should point out, too, we can talk more about this during the podcast, there are full-time and part-time opportunities in the Air National Guard. Are you a full-time Guard member or a part-timer?
So as of right now, yes, I'm full-time.
And Sergeant Love, same question for you. Again, did you begin active duty? Or did you begin, as Sergeant Zavala did, as a member of the Guard? Tell us about what led you to where you are right now.
Yes, sir. I started my career out as active duty. I was recruited out of the state of Arkansas, and definitely I started, or I was recruited while I was in college. I wanted to come in under the medical program at the college I was at, but it was going to take a whole year for me to be in that program, seeing as how I tested late. I qualified, but I would have just had to wait an extra year. And so I knew I just didn't want to be at home waiting with not actively doing anything. And so I just so happened to talk to a couple of members. I was working at Sears at the time, for those who still remember that store. I was working there, and it was a couple of Guard members there who were telling me about the Air Force. Now, at the time, I didn't really recognize, like Sergeant Zavala said, that they were Guard members. I just knew that they were a part of the military. And so from that moment forward, I just went into the active duty recruiter's office, and she got me into the Air Force as a aircraft armament systems apprentice, which is what we all in the inside call weapons. And basically what we do in there is we take care of the weapon systems for each fighter jet, whether it's loading, maintaining, and troubleshooting all the weapons, be it guided bombs, any guns, anything like that nature that covers the weapon systems. We take care of it, we load it, and make sure.
Now, what type of aircraft were you working on as an armament specialist?
Yes, sir. So I've had the opportunity to work on the B-2. The B-2 is mostly known as, it's like the black jet. It looks like the stealth fighter. Has two long wings on the side. I worked on the B-2, the B-52, which was one of the older models. The Buff is what they call it. I've worked on the A-10 and the F-22 so far, sir.
So obviously you were at Whiteman Air Force Base with the B-2s. Where were you with the Buffs, the B-52s?
So, sir, most of my education came from tech school there, which was in Wichita Falls.
Shepherd Air Force Base. I've been there.
Correct.
Many years ago.
Correct. And so I started there with the B-52, and then I had a little bit of time in Barksdale, if you're familiar with that.
Been there before, too. Yeah, Bossier City, Louisiana, the excitement capital of Northeast Louisiana. Maybe.
Yes. So, it was a short time there with the B-52, but definitely A-10s were in Korea, and then F-22 here.
Okay. And what led you to make the transition from active duty into being a member of the Guard? Now, I'm assuming you're here at Langley, because we should point out, and we can talk about this as well, at Langley Air Force Base, we have both the 1st Fighter Wing on the active duty side, and we have the 192nd Fighter Wing, which is one of the key units in the Virginia Air National Guard. And it's a truly integrated combined wing in the sense that you have Guard members, active duty folks working side by side. The pilots within a formation, you may have a couple of active duty, couple of Guard pilots, maintenance crews on the ground again, active duty and Guard working side by side. So was that where you made this transition to the Air National Guard?
I did, sir. I was, as you already put it, I was already a member here of the, which is now the 633rd here at Langley Air Force Base. I was active duty here for a good amount of years, and I reached higher tenure in the Air Force. And so I knew I still wanted to serve. You know how you kind of get acclimated after so long, and I felt like it was still a fit for me. And so I just happened to go into the Guard recruiting office, and they, like as you put it too, they had full-time opportunities, which thankfully I was able to apply for, and now I'm a full-time recruiter.
Well, we should point out, too, that when you're a full-timer in the Guard, you're receiving the same pay, the same benefits as your active duty counterparts.
That is correct, sir, which is one of they call it the hidden gem inside of the Guard. Which we refer to it as an AGR, Active Guard Reserve. And so you do, medical, your time towards retirement, all that is based on active duty time.
Let's talk about recruiting duty. Now, you're in a job that sometimes gets a little bit maligned, you might say, the people that will say anything to get people into the military. And I should say, in my experience, going back when I joined the Air Force 40 years ago, my recruiter was completely up front and forward with me. He didn't lie, didn't, exaggerate or anything like that. He gave me the straight story on the Air Force and, helped me make my decision there. And I found that with virtually every recruiter at all the branches that I've talked to. But again, recruiting can be a tough assignment, either on the active duty side or on the Guard side. I'm assuming that all the people that are doing recruiting duty, both in the Guard and on the active side, are volunteers. Sergeant Hurd, what made you volunteer to be a recruiter?
So I want to say in about 2016, I had just got back from deployment, and we have what we call a developmental special duty. In the Air Force, we call it DSD. And that recognizes a non-commissioned officer who has performed well to move forward and do something for the Air Force, something different, and put them in the leadership position. So my superintendent had sat me down and said, hey, we want to select you for this opportunity. There's 3 opportunities. You can be an instructor, you can be a military training leader, or possibly a recruiter. And I said, sir, you can put me down for all 3. It doesn't matter. I raise my right hand, and I'll serve proudly with whatever I do. And I got an email about 6 months later and said, hey, congratulations, you've been selected to be a recruiter. So, my reasons for joining, I just wanted to serve at a young age. And I tell, recruits today, hey, it doesn't matter what job I do in the Air Force. As long as I serve my country. The Air Force asked me today to be a professional rock painter. I'm going to be the best professional rock painter. So that's how I became a recruiter.
Actually, I've known people that have done that because there were bases back in the 80s and 90s. They wanted a certain look. And, I've heard of gallons of paint being used on the grass and rocks being painted and stuff like that. Not recently, but, in my experience, yes, that has happened before. Your tax dollars at work. I thought you were going to say something, Sergeant Zavel. Were you going to, or?
Oh, no.
All right.
I just thought it was funny,
No,
rock painter.
Sergeant Rhodes, your experience in getting into recruiting duty, and has it been what you thought it was going to be when you first raised your hand and volunteered for it?
Well, I've only been doing this for a month. So far, some of it has been exactly what I thought, and like anything, until you get into it, you're going to see that there are other things that are nothing like what you thought it would be. You have to be very diligent to keep a schedule, and not just a schedule, but down to the hours, and make sure that you're going to get everything done. Because especially in this area, there's a lot of interest in the Air Force. and being able to balance your time to, talk to everyone that has interest is a little bit of a struggle sometimes.
It's really not, we in the Air Force are often accused of being the country club service, the office service, in the sense 7:30 to 4:30, we're all heading out the gate at the end of the day. But recruiting duty is different. You're not working a typical 7:30 to 4:30 day. There's time at night, time on the weekend, things like that.
Yeah, 8:30 in the evening last night, I was on my computer. I had some people that had just finished taking their ASVAB at the processing site, and I was pulling their scores. So there's stuff like that all the time. Weekends, 2 weeks ago, I was working a festival in Norfolk, so very irregular hours.
And I should point out, too, that in many locations around the country, because, the Air Force has recruiters across the country, the Guard has recruiters in all the states where there's an Air National Guard presence. It's not like you have a large staff. You're usually kind of a one-person band to some degree, and there's really no backup. You have to get the job done, and, again, there's not that support element, or the supporting element that you're working with and working for may be, quite a distance away. Something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely the case with this. I share an office with one other person, and he and I work well together so far, and I think that's going to continue. But the next closest recruiting office, I think, is probably about 30 minutes away, and then our leadership, they're about 30, 40 minutes away, and then the next step to leadership after that gets, they're not even in the same state. So, yeah, definitely, if you're not able to self-govern yourself, there could be issues because there are people there to keep track of you.
Sergeant Love, how long have you been a recruiter now for the Air National Guard, and has the job, I guess you might say, has it met what you thought it was going to be when you first volunteered for that duty?
Yes, sir. So I've definitely been in at least over 2 years now as a recruiter, and definitely we call them tiers, but there are steps in progression when you become a recruiter. Basically, kind of what he said. Once you learn the job, you start learning steps, and you tailor it recruiting to the style of the person that you are, and as well as the demographic. Definitely as a recruiter, we covered in the Guard, which is a little bit different, a little bit than active duty. We cover different zones, more so because there's only a select few of us inside the state of Virginia, and so we have to cover multiple zones. So I have anywhere between Portsmouth, Norfolk, Suffolk, and a little bit of Chesapeake that we split up, of schools, colleges, areas that we have to visit to garner that interest, bring that presence there, especially with the Guard. We have to kind of distinguish a bit between the component. We're in the same branch, but we have different components. And it is definitely what I expected it to be. I knew I wanted to be a recruiter because I wanted to help the young kids. I definitely don't mind talking. I definitely love the challenge of room presentations, bringing that knowledge to a lot of people who don't know what the Air Force is about, or the military. Sometimes there may be stigmatisms and thoughts of what the military is until you talk to somebody who's had the experience that can relate to you, that looks like you. Definitely can make that experience better. So it's definitely what I thought.
Sergeant Zavala, how about you? How long have you been recruiting for the Virginia Air National Guard? And again, how did your initial expectations, how have they measured up with what you've actually experienced as a recruiter?
Right. Okay. So I've been recruiting for 3 years now, and I knew I wanted to be a recruiter. So I was an electrician first, and then we did have a recruiter that sat at Redwards, which is in Virginia Beach. We have a location out there, and I would always speak with her, and she just kind of, just planted the seed, and that's kind of where it started. So I ended up applying for the recruiter position 3 times, but the third time I finally got the position. And I will say that it is exactly what I thought it would be. I mean, a few things here and there, maybe, a little different, but I knew it would be a challenge at first, and it was very challenging. Just to kind of learn everything about recruiting, how to navigate different demographics, especially the presentations that we would have to do, the public speaking, that was, a challenge at first. But I do like a challenge. I love a challenge, so I knew that this would be a good fit for me.
Yeah, if you would, talk about the training that you receive from the Air Force or from the Guard in becoming a recruiter and how well that prepared you for the job you're in right now.
Right. Okay. So obviously we all have to go to a recruiting school, but even before that, we have different courses that we have to take as far as Airman Leadership School, and that kind of gets you prepared for public speaking and how to navigate troops under you, and then from there, once you move on to recruiting school, it's still more public speaking, more evaluations. And then also, as a recruiter, we still have, trainings every month. And we even meet with other branches. We work with the Army, the Navy. We've had, Army recruiters come in and just kind of give us their spiel and, kind of what they do. And we just go back and forth. So we're constantly training. Things are always changing in recruiting. So that's kind of a never-ending thing.
Here's kind of an open question for the group. And, I'd like to hear from each of you on this particular topic. Let's talk about the recruiting environment that you're operating in right now. We know, for example, that only 1% of the U.S. population wears the uniform. In many families, you have to go back to World War II to find somebody in the family who actually served in the military. So for many kids growing up today, there's no real connection with the U.S. military. They really don't have any knowledge base of what the military is all about, what it has to offer. We also know, too, that among the recruiting group, the primary group you're going after, say the 18 to 25, 18 to 30-year-old group, only about 25% actually meet the minimum standards for military service. They can't qualify due to anything from medication they were on as a child for something like ADHD, maybe they had asthma, maybe they had a run-in with the law, maybe they've had, they can't achieve the passing score on the ASVAB. How difficult is it, given those obstacles I was outlining there a moment ago, how difficult is it for you to find qualified recruits and to meet the quota you need to supply that pipeline of new airmen that you need each year?
So, to answer that question, I would say that there are what we call the Department of Defense instructions, and that gives us a guidance to find, what is permissibly, potentially disqualifying health conditions. But when one of our recruits does go to the military entrance processing station, we call it MEPS, they do get a physical done by one of the chief medical officers. And if there are any underlying health issues that you just spoke of, that goes to the Air Force Surgeon General. And for every branch, they have their own Surgeon General. So if our Surgeon General does deny an applicant, they can go to another service branch and try through that branch as well. What I will say, though, is especially in this community, we have such a large military strong heritage here to where we have lots of recruits who do want to join. And we just have to use some more what we call TLC to get what we call a medical documentation to see if we can get those individuals who do have health factors approved or disapproved.
Sure. And on that note, what are some of the things from a health perspective that are potentially disqualifying for a recruit?
Yeah, so potentially disqualifying, it would be, and we would call it categories, but for law violations, possession of controlled substances, multiple DUIs, some of those are waiverable, but for health conditions, per the DODI, which is the Department of Defense instructions, asthma after the age of 13, eczema after the age of 9. If you've been on any type of anxiety medications, you have to be off of the medications for 2 years. Of course, be released from care. So the most important factor is being released from care so that when your documentation is reviewed by the chief medical officers and forwarded to the Air Force Surgeon General, that'll give a good word picture to that Air Force Surgeon General. So at the end of the day, the Air Force Surgeon General is the final say about who can enlist into the Air Force.
And in your experience, how easy is it for a recruit who maybe has kind of like a borderline medical issue? How easy or how difficult is it for them to get that medical waiver so they can go ahead and enlist?
So from what I've seen, it really just depends on every situation. But as long as the member or the applicant has, that medical documentation, I would say they do have a good chance of getting a waiver. It's just a matter of having it documented. I don't see too many disapproved waivers as long as they have the proper documentation, medical documents. So.
Can I piggyback on that real quick, sir? And I would encourage those who, if they do have any medical issues, to not feel like they can't come talk to a recruiter. Because, like you said earlier, a lot of people don't know the process, so you kind of just go off of fear a little bit and you think that you won't be able to get in. But just like Sergeant Zavala said and Sergeant Hurst said, there are plenty of waivers out there for individuals, like you said, asthma, things like that. There may be some steps you have to take, things you have to do, but like you said, as long as it's documented, for the most part, I would say there could be a waiver that could be done to get you in.
Now, another reason we hear that recruits typically can't get in the military is the issue of physical fitness. It's no secret that, we as a society have gotten fatter and softer, and the young people that maybe, were playing sports a generation ago are now the only sports they're playing involve their thumbs and a game controller and things like that. How many recruits do you see out there who have those issues in terms of not being able to meet minimum physical fitness standards? And I'm assuming the Air Force recruiters do some of the same things the other service recruiters do. That is, you can actually work with a recruit and kind of help them get in the shape they need to be in to get in the Air Force or the Air National Guard.
So there is a standard. I think that we, for the most part, I would say for the Air Force that we all abide by is a height and weight standard. So definitely, those are one of the primary questions we ask to an applicant that comes to any recruiter, especially in the Air Force. I can only speak on the Air Force because of our regulation. But once you give us your height, we then do follow regulation. What is required, you have to have a certain weight standard per each height. So don't, even if you're overweight, as you mentioned earlier, there are programs, if they're willing to work, we can give pointers, things of that nature to point you in the right direction. Because like you said, most people have not even started fitness. They don't know how to get into the gym. They don't know what it takes. And so we can lead them down that direction, because obviously we have a PT standard ourselves that we have to meet each year. And for some, it's 2 times a year, depending on how well you do on your fitness.
And I think it's worth noting, too, that fitness standards in the Air Force and across DOD are changing in the sense, as you pointed out a moment ago, there used to be kind of a one-size-fits-all fitness test that you had to take at least once a year. And now the Air Force, understanding that the fitness needs may vary according to your job, your career field, they're looking at, and they're actually, I guess, now implementing different types of a fitness test. For example, if you're what they call a battlefield airman, you're with the TAC Air Control Party, or a pararescue and combat controller, you have to meet some pretty rigorous fitness standards, because you're out there with, Army Special Forces, Navy SEAL teams, what have you. You've got to be in tip-top physical shape. But on the other hand, if you're a cyber troop and you're manning a keyboard all day, then maybe, the fitness requirements shouldn't be quite as stringent. So do you think, that's going to help you in terms of attracting recruits, knowing that, maybe folks who meet the other criteria you're looking for, but, they're never going to qualify for being a pararescueman? Maybe the new, adjusted fitness standards will be something that, will kind of work in your favor in getting them in the Air Force or Air National Guard.
So I always believe that, to piggyback off of what Sergeant Love just spoke about, that our height and weight chart, that's a baseline. Hey, with this BMI being at this height and this weight, that you should be able to pass the Air Force physical training test. Of course, what you spoke about with the past training, and that would be for all the special warfare. For those recruits who do want to go and take that step, they do have to push themselves physically harder than, for example, a cyber warfare technician. But with the way the physical training has changed in the Air Force, fine-tuning things, I still believe that if your height and your weight is in the correct category, and if you do physical training at the allotted times that every AFSC gives us, and eat a well-balanced nutrition, that you should be able to pass our physical training. So for the stigma of thinking that, hey, the military might not be for me because, I can't run X, Y, and Z, miles, or I can't do X, Y, and Z push-ups and sit-ups, I would tell all the recruits who are listening, hey, potential recruits who are listening, give it a try. Come into a recruiting office and speak to one of us. And everybody starts off from day one to the present. So don't think that you're disqualified already. Is what I'm saying.
Another issue that we hear folks talking about in terms of whether they would qualify for military service is the issue of drug use. Obviously, we have a society now where the perspective on using drugs, especially marijuana, has changed a great deal. And recruits, folks who are thinking about going to the military, would ask, if I had used marijuana in the past, is that an automatic disqualifier for me in going in the Air Force or the Air National Guard?
Not at all. So the Air Force, and I would say the DoD in general has changed a lot of their restrictions in the past. So if I do have a recruit who has smoked in the past, as long as it's annotated in their 2807-2, that is the medical form that does go up to the military entrance processing station, it would be annotated by the doctors there. So marijuana use won't disqualify you. And I tell that to all my recruits because I would say in the past, it was something that was frowned upon, of course, and you won't be able to join. But the Air Force is one of the branches that continually changes with our society.
And we should point out, though, that once you're in, it's still a zero-tolerance policy. But by virtue of the fact that you used marijuana in the past, at a certain level, that is not going to disqualify you from joining the Air Force or joining the Air National Guard. Let's switch now and talk about opportunities and maybe some of the career fields that the Air Force and the Air National Guard are really looking to fill nowadays. First of all, on the active duty side, Sergeant Herr and Sergeant Rhodes, what are some of the hot career fields? What are some of the real openings that the Air Force is looking to fill right now? We know you have to fill all the career fields, all the AFSCs, but certainly I'm sure there are some that have a higher demand, a higher need than others, and which ones are those?
Well, we're always looking for people to fill spots mechanically, to work on airplanes and different components to the airplanes, whether it be the prop for like a C-130 or the jet propulsion for the fighters. Lots of different jobs in that range that we're always looking for people to fill.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, we're air powered. So at the end of the day, the majority of our AFSCs, I would say, don't quote me on it, but at least 50% of our jobs are going to be working with airframe, air power, propulsion. But we do have a big need right now for cyber. Mm-hmm. So that is a huge push right now because we're moving to a technology-based force, and to be able to supplement that, we do need technicians. And so for the current active duty members who are recruiters, we currently recruit for the Air Force and the Space Force. Currently, the Space Force is looking for the AFSCs in the 1N category. That would be intelligence, as well as the 3D category. That would be communications and cyber and that nature. And then some of the 1Cs.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you guys brought that up because we're doing this on a podcast, audio only. You can't see, but both Sergeant Rhodes and Sergeant Herr are wearing their Space Force polo shirts. So I was going to ask, and you guys have already answered the question, along with recruiting for the Air Force, you're also recruiting for the Space Force.
Correct. So for the enlisted members in the Space Force and the officer members, they're now called guardians. Mm-hmm. So we as recruiters right now for the active duty Air Force are working in conjunction with the Space Force until the Space Force can lift off and be able to recruit on their own. We are supplementing their members currently.
Now, you mentioned the areas Space Force is looking for right now, intelligence, communications being a couple of them. Obviously, anybody who's been in the military knows that in determining what potential job you might be going into, you take a test called the ASVAB. Was it Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery or something like that? I remember taking it years and years ago. And typically to get into certain career fields, you have to achieve a certain score. I'm assuming the Space Force is also using the ASVAB as a tool. And I was going to ask, what kind of a score for someone who wants to go in Space Force and get in the intelligence side of that particular branch? What kind of an ASVAB score do you need to get into the Space Force and some of these jobs you were talking about?
All right, that's a great question. For all of the electronic base jobs, that would be all the 3 Delta jobs, you would have to have mainly a 70 or better in the electronics category. And then for the general category, if you want to get into some of our intelligence career fields, I would say at least a 65 and above.
That's a fairly high score. Fairly high score. Now, on the jobs on the active duty side in the Air Force, talk about some of those. You mentioned the mechanical jobs. Folks who are going to be, working in a repair shop, jet engine shop, bending wrenches out there on the flight line, working on the aircraft. What kind of an ASVAB score do you need to qualify for a job like that?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, I've only been doing this for a month, so I can't rattle off those numbers quite as well as Sergeant Herr, maybe some of the others here.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So, sorry to cut you off. So, mechanical 47 is usually the baseline to be qualified for a majority of the mechanical careers. And I get a lot of recruits who come to my office after they take the ASVAB and they say, "I'm sorry, sir, I only scored a 47 in mechanical." And if they, relay that to high school scores, middle school, grade school scores, they think they just got an F. And I'm like, no, actually, you just scored great in that category. So you actually qualify for X, Y, and Z.
But now we should point out, too, that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you can take the ASVAB again?
Yes.
And let's talk about on the Air Guard side. What are some of the positions you're looking to fill in the Virginia Air National Guard right now? And again, what kind of qualifications a recruit would need to move into those types of jobs?
So we are sort of looking for the same thing. We are looking for mechanical career fields along with our construction trades. So those are the 2 big areas right now that we're focusing on. We do have cyber, we do have intel and medical, but those have already been filled up as of right now. So we do have a mission over at Langley, with all the mechanical jobs working on the jets. So like Sergeant Herr said, you do need at least a 47 for most of those mechanical jobs in the mechanical field. So every score or job is different. Some may require a higher electrical score or a higher mechanical score, and then same with the construction trades. It's around the same, mechanical 47. I mean, electrical may be like 56 or something like that, but those are pretty much the
Sure.
that we're looking for.
Now, talking again about opportunities and things like that, we should point out, obviously, that COVID has had an impact on the military, restricting activities and things like that. The Air Force at one point, I guess it was last year, maybe earlier this year, they were actually, for the first time in recent memory, they were running basic training primarily at Lackland, the way it's been forever, but they were also putting flights through at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. Now, they've gone away from that, but I was wondering what kind of impact that the COVID pandemic had on your work as recruiters and the challenges that posed for you.
So at first, when everything was kind of going crazy and COVID first hit and everything was shutting down, I would say it was a challenge. I think for all of us, it was pretty challenging because we didn't really know how to move forward with recruiting, but I think we all kind of just got creative. And this is just with all the branches, So we definitely used social media as a tool. I think we all have used that. And, a lot of the kids now, they're on social media, so it ended up working out for our benefit anyway. And then just reaching out through virtual career fairs, still communicating with the schools and the teachers, things like that. But it was hard to get in front of those applicants. So we just found other creative ways. Even like with this podcast, I think this is a really good way to reach out to members who are interested. And we don't have to reach out face to face. So at first it was challenging, but I think we kind of figured it out along the way.
And we should point out that collectively, the recruiters for the Guard, for the active duty side, for the Air Force Reserve have done a pretty good job. I saw something not long ago where all components of the Air Force met their recruiting goal for the past year. So kudos to all of you and all of your colleagues out there for achieving that goal, meeting those quotas under, some really unique and challenging circumstances. Next story I was going to cover here on the podcast today as we continue our Air Force recruiter roundtable is we know about the enlisted opportunities for young people that maybe haven't finished their college degree yet. For folks that have a college degree and maybe looking at starting a new career or want to serve or what have you, are you also recruiting for the officer training programs, OTS, some of the medical programs, things like that?
So for the Air National Guard, there are two types of ways that you can come in as an officer. And so we do have an officer recruiter inside the Virginia Air National Guard where if you already have your degree, you'll have the opportunity to speak with the officer recruiter. He'll, for a better lack of a word, vet to see, what your degree, what your schooling has been in to see if you can fit inside the Air National Guard. I know currently there are specifics that we are looking for. If you have a degree in divinity, where you could become a chaplain, that would definitely be a degree for those who are out there who have those type of degrees, who are like don't know if that degree would get you in the door. It's definitely one that we are looking for. Law degrees, definitely we can put you in as a JAG officer. Definitely we can use you there. Medical degrees. Medical degrees are good degrees. You can have your bachelor's, you can be, you can have your certification as a registered nurse. But for those who are out there who have higher, degrees, where if you attain your master's or your PhD, definitely we are looking for those as well. And then as far as we do get a lot of questions when it comes to pilots, I kind of just want to say for the Air National Guard, when it comes to our pilot program, we mostly recruit within the active duty field, specifically because we have the F-22 here at Langley. And because we have the F-22 here, we can only take those who have F-22 experience. I just want to explain that because I don't want to discourage those who want to come in as pilots, but the F-22 is what we have.
Sure, and it is a unique program, and like you said, with the qualifications you need and everything, it makes sense to recruit people for the Virginia National Guard among the ranks of folks on active duty who are getting out that want to stay in the military and want to keep flying the F-22. But we should point out, too, again, because we have podcast listeners all across the country and around the world for that matter, that there are Guard units out there that, do take young troops who maybe start off as an airman, they finish their college degree, and then they will get a pilot slot within the unit. And the Guard will send them off to what's called UPT, undergraduate pilot training. Then they will go on to the RTU, the specialized training in the aircraft being flown by that unit, and then come back to the unit, and this time not as an airman, but as a young lieutenant, as a qualified pilot or co-pilot in that particular aircraft that Guard unit flies.
That is correct, sir. That is correct. And it's good that you mentioned that. We definitely, you can also, so say you're still trying to attain your degree, you're going to school, for those who are currently in college, and those who are in high school who are at least at the age of 17. Definitely what you could do is you could join the Air National Guard enlisted. You can also go through, what we recommend when you want to become a pilot is to definitely come in, get your foot in the door with the Virginia Air National Guard. Go ahead and go to that college respective ROTC program. It doesn't have to, I'll give an example. So if you're joining the Virginia Air National Guard, you can still be a part of a different branch ROTC. However, you would have to speak with their commandant to figure out what their regulations and rules are as far as getting you into that pilot program. But that would be my recommendation as far, or you could go to a military training school as well. They do have good pilot programs there. And inside our enlisted force, so if you want to come in enlisted, we do have a opportunity. It's every month of July, I believe, where you can submit a package as well, and which would obviously mean you would have to have a degree as well at that point, and you could potentially be picked up as an officer as well. It may meet the needs of the Air Force.
On the active duty side, Sergeant Herr and Sergeant Rhodes, what kind of positions, what kind of skills are you looking for in terms of bringing folks in as new officers?
Yeah, great question. So for the majority of the college graduates or seniors who are about to graduate, I always recommend them come into the fall. We do have projected 2 boards per year for officers, and as us being the enlisted accessions, our job is to pre-qualify all of the college students who are in the area here and then move them forward to contact our officer recruiters. Our officer recruiters are located in Arlington, Virginia. So, of course, if anybody's listening, if you do want to get pre-qualified to see if you can qualify to be a officer in the Air Force, come and contact us. We're over at 605 New Market Drive, suite number 20, and that'll be Air Force Recruiting. Of course, all recruits who are looking to be officers, they do have to take what we call the AFOQT, and that's the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test. Dependent on your score and your GPA, degrees do matter, but I would say however you perform on your AFOQT will matter a lot on what jobs are available to you when you do go through OTS.
What are some of the officer jobs on the active duty side that the Air Force is really looking to fill these days?
So, of course, I always use the Air Force portal to search for pertinent information, and right now we're actually doing like direct to duty for all of these cyber careers. Mm-hmm. So cyber, like I said earlier, even on the enlisted side, the officer side, we're really hurting for cyber technicians.
Now, for someone who perhaps is a student at a community college like Thomas Nelson right now, and they would like to look at getting in the military, and they're worried about the fact that, well, this is going to interrupt my college education right now, I think it's worth pointing out that both with the Guard and on the active duty side, there are going to be education benefits. Once you complete your training and you're on active duty or a member of the Guard. Talk about the education benefits available to members in the Virginia Guard.
So I think with the Guard, we have a really good program as far as, helping out the college students. A lot of members who were in the Virginia Guard, they are in college. So because we are part-time, we're 1 week in a month and then 2 weeks out of the year, it does allow you to, stay in college full-time, and then also the Virginia Guard will help you pay for your college. So not only do we have the state college benefits, but we also have the federal benefits as well. They can use the Montgomery GI Bill. So that will help pay for college. And that 2 weeks out of the year that I mentioned, that usually is in the summertime, so it doesn't really interfere with, with your college classes or anything. So that's a good program as far as like if you really want to just focus on school but still serve part-time.
And a good way, as you point out, to continue your education, finish your education, and not rack up a mountain of student debt in the process. And obviously similar benefits on the active duty side. Yeah,
very much. It changes, I want to say, per fiscal year for us for our tuition assistance, but currently right now it's at $4,500 capped for tuition assistance. Of course, I've never tapped into my Montgomery GI Bill, but prospective, cadets or prospective officers, they can dip into it. I had a friend who dipped into his MGIB and was able to finish his degree in commission, go from enlisted to officer. So enlisted officer programs are out there too if you're already in the enlisted corps.
And worth noting again that in terms of additional educational benefits, something that many people don't realize, the Air Force actually operates the largest community college in the world. And when you join the Air Force as a brand new airman, you're automatically enrolled in a school called the Community College of the Air Force. And as you go through basic training, tech school, you do your CDCs and get your upgrade to your 5 skill level, you're actually earning college credit, which can be applied toward your associate degree with the Community College of the Air Force. And then all you have to do to finish that degree is take 5 classes with a civilian school like Thomas Nelson, hint, hint, and you've got your associate degree. And now many of those CCAF associate degrees, you can take those credits, at least part of them, and then roll them into a bachelor's program. So it's a great way to, to get what's basically a free associate's degree and then use that as a foundation for other things in terms of your educational pursuits.
Correct. So with the we call CCAF, of course, we also have in the Air Force portal the Air University, and any enlisted member can get onto the Air Force portal, of course, and then look to see which colleges accept the CCAF. And we have, last I looked, don't quote me, but I believe we had over 50 plus universities and colleges spread out, whether in person or distance learning, that accepts our degrees.
And we should point out, too, that in terms of helping airmen get those 5 general ed classes knocked out for their CCAF, there's a program called GEM, General Education Mobile, schools that are preferred providers of those general ed classes. Thomas Nelson, we're in the process of joining that program, so we should be a GEM school here probably within the next month or so. And again, we encourage any airman out there who needs those general ed classes to finish off their CCAF, and you're looking for a school, by all means, check out Thomas Nelson. We'll have our GEM landing page up here very, very soon. And again, we've been educating airmen for over 50 years here, and we look forward to kind of taking a different approach and moving in a new direction to further expand the opportunities for airmen that are trying to knock out their associate's degree with CCAF. As we kind of wrap up our discussion here today, where do you see recruiting? Where do you see the needs for the active duty side for the Guard going in the next, say, 3, 5, 7 years? And I'll start with Sergeant Herr on the active side.
So what I believe what the Air Force will do, the Air Force is going to continue to grow, especially with the Space Force now aligning with our mission. We're going to continue to grow with the Space Force. A lot of our active duty members who were Air Force actually donned the Space Force name tapes. And we went from the what's the color? Is it red? Spice brown to the blue. And so I had a friend over here who was stationed at Langley. He went from being in the Air Force and then one day being into the Space Force. So we're going to continue our mission with the active duty. That's going to continue to grow for the Air Force and the active duty Space Force. So I don't foresee us slowing any down in the next 5 to 7 years. We're going to continue to keep pushing.
How about on the Guard side, Sergeant Love?
Definitely, I think Sergeant Herr kind of touched on it. They're definitely moving forward to what they're calling the TFI, Total Force Integration as well, where it just won't be Guard recruiter. Then you have to go talk to, if you want to do active duty, you talk to an active duty recruiter or just a reserve recruiter. I think they're trying to move forward with making it so that we all have the capability to recruit in each respective component. Also, I think Sergeant Zavala touched on it a little bit earlier, moving towards social media. That's probably going to be a big part of every recruiter, that online present, utilizing Instagram, Facebook, any social site that'll reach out to those, as you said earlier, the demographic that we're looking for. And just real quick, I know sometimes we get calls for those who are wondering how to get a hold of the Air National Guard recruiters. But for those who are listening, the easiest way to reach out to us would to be easily Google search engine. Just type in 192 for the 192nd and then type in fighter wing. You'll get a list of links. The first link should lead you to our website page. If you navigate the page, you can find the recruiters there to easily get a hold of us.
And Sergeant Rhodes, on the active duty side, someone trying to reach a local active duty Air Force recruiter, what's the best way that a young person can contact you?
Well, the best way to reach me would be by text or calling. And the number for my recruiter phone is 757-364-5512. Okay.
And email address?
Email is benjamin.rhodes, that's RHOADES, .2@us.af.mil. But, honestly, call or text is definitely the best way to get a hold of me.
And, of course, you guys are also very active in the local community. Find you at high schools, education fairs, other events around the area. Any events coming up that you plan to be at that you would like to maybe plug right now?
So we do have a few career fairs coming up at the high schools, but So every recruiter has like a different area that you're
Sure.
in. So specifically myself, and we have Sergeant Williams out in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake area, so we cover all of those schools. But I think there are some career fairs coming up too in Hampton and Newport News area. So we have the recruiters on the website that Sergeant Love just gave out, and for each area they can contact that recruiter.
And I would guess, too, if you're talking about a high school student who's maybe thinking about going in the Air Force or the Air National Guard, they can probably contact their school guidance counselor, who I'm sure you work with, and they can tell you when the recruiter is going to be at the school and, set up an appointment. Should also point out, too, that we have recruiters here on campus at Thomas Nelson from time to time. All of you have an open invitation to come here. We can put you in touch with the folks that run our Veterans Center, and, you can come in, set up, and schedule appointments, whatever you want to do, and then meet with people here. They're part of the Thomas Nelson community that, may have an interest in joining either the Air Force or the Air National Guard. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules today. Very informative, almost an hour that we've been talking about opportunities both in the Air Force and the Air Force Reserve. Recruiters on the active duty side, Tech Sergeant David Herr and Staff Sergeant Benjamin Rose, and from the Virginia Air National Guard, we've been talking with Tech Sergeant Franklin Love and Tech Sergeant Alexandria Zavala. And again, we'd like to thank you for listening to At Ease, the military podcast of Thomas Nelson Community College. For more information on programs that we have for the Armed Forces community, visit our website. That's tncc.edu/military. I'm Gary Pounder. Join us again next time on At Ease.